Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start the conference, and in order to avoid any disturbances during the conference later, I would like to ask you to stay muted. Please rename your Zoom's display name accordingly to your role. For presenters, please add letter R followed by your room's number and your full name. For session chairs, add SC in the beginning, followed by R with your room's number and your full name. Thank you. The Honorable President of Association International Business and Professionals Management, AIBPM, Lim Gaisin PhD, and the Vice President, Ira Christiana. The Honorable, our co-host, Faculty Economics and Business, Universitas Brawijaya, Malang. The Honorable, our co-host, Universitas Muhammadiyah Sumatera Utara, North Sumatra. The Honorable, our co-host, Sekolah Tinggi Ilmu Ekonomi Yayasan Administrasi Indonesia, Central Jakarta. The Honorable, our partner, University Science Malaysia, Malaysia. The Honorable, our partner, Fitrox College, Malaysia. The Honorable, our partner, Penang Youth Development Corporation, Malaysia. The Honorable keynote speakers of the conference, the Honorable Mr. and Mrs. Presenters, lecturers, distinguished guests, fellow students, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rosalia Rodatul Afifa, the MC for today's conference. I am very pleased and honored to be here. First of all, I would like to welcome you all to this prestigious conference, the 2023 Penang International Conference and Project Management held by the Association of International Business and Professional Management, attended by various people across the world, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, Nigeria, Pakistan, Poland, Iraq, Kuwait, and etc. In this event, we will have insightful presentation from prominent speakers across the countries, whom I believe shall enrich our knowledge regarding the theme of this conference, the multiple stakeholders' contribution to recovering together and recovering stronger after COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, before the conference begins, I would like to invite all of us to listen to the Indonesian national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Ladies and gentlemen, for the next one, I would like to invite all of us to watch the profile videos of AIBPM, Faculty Economics and Business Universitas Brawijaya, and Universitas Muhammadiyah Sumatera Utara.
This academic conference is one of the most important conferences specifically to me because it allows us academics and students, our students, to get together and start sharing the latest in terms of research and education. I encourage all to participate in this wonderful conference, and I thank the organizers for this wonderful conference. Thank you.
This is my first time to attend these activities, and I really love it. It belongs to accounting, management, and also business. And as I am master of accounting, I really enjoyed, and I got really many beneficial knowledge from these activities, and I would like to join to the next agenda of this program.
Thanks a lot for inviting me to such conference that we get experience. It's really benefit for new generation. So we are so happy that we join such kind of conference. Hopefully next time we will enjoy to another conference, such beneficial conference.
Kesan saya selama mengikuti international conference ini sangat recommended ya, karena sejak dari proses aplikasi submit paper sampai dengan pelaksanaan, baik ini versi online maupun offline, suasananya bagus, enjoy.
Saya happy banget ikut conference ini dan feel so lucky karena saya ketemu banyak banget guru-guru yang bisa saya ikutin jejaknya, dan juga paper saya juga beberapa kali juga udah dipublish.
Universitas Brawijaya is one of the leading universities in Indonesia with more than 60,000 students in various degrees. It is awarded an A accreditation by National Accreditation Agency for Higher Education and granted the 4th best university in Indonesia based on 4ISU World University Ranking. Universitas Brawijaya has 15 faculties, in which Faculty of Economics and Business is the best faculty. Malang Economic University, or as known as MEU, the embryo of Faculty of Economics and Business, was established by Malang Economic Higher Education Foundation on June 27, 1957, with Notary Decree No. 26 dated on August 15, 1957. Malang Economic University merged into part of Universitas Brawijaya and was called a Faculty of Economics on October 3, 1961. Years ago, and Faculty of Economics never stopped improving itself. It was on January 14, 2011, an institutional transformation was created from Faculty of Economics to Faculty of Economics and Business. This became one of the cornerstones of fundamental change and a necessity due to internal developments, as well as changes in the organization's external demands, including changes in the organization's environment, scientific development, and demands for international accreditation towards the world-class faculty. Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Brawijaya mission statement is becoming an internationally reputable higher education institution in economics and business, which produce graduates possessing entrepreneurial spirit, humanity, environment, and spiritual awareness, and develop knowledge and technology in order to serve society through education and research based on local and universal values. Currently, Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Brawijaya has 3 departments with 14 study programs, consisting of undergraduate and postgraduate programs.
Faculty of Economic and Business in University of Brawijaya. I got special experience here. While studying class, I feel the dynamic learning and teaching activities. Among there is many cultural and language differences between us, but also we have the great opportunity to see many science perspectives from local and international students.
The way we learn in the Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Brawijaya isn't always within the classroom. We have the opportunity to apply our knowledge into the actual business or economical activities, such as Entrepreneur Days, where we were asked to create our own business and present it. We also have company visit to gain insights on the actual industry.
Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Brawijaya continuously improve its quality by transforming and creating positive contribution to produce graduates who are capable of facing global competitions and serving society.
Sumatera Utara is a province with the multicultural and ethnic diversity that is compound and delivers harmony. The multicultural of Sumatra Utara is sourced from the beauty of its natural resources. The diversity and natural resources of Sumatra Utara become one of the uniqueness of Indonesia. University of Muhammadiyah Sumatra Utara was established as a pillar to support the availability of qualified human resources. UMSU become a solution to entertain the modern and advanced community programs. UMSU was built to answer the challenge and transformation era. UMSU grows and evolves to take part in developing civilization of a nation and its human resources. To answer the society change as well as the development of knowledge and technology. By means of the Islamic and Muhammadiyah values, growing the faith in delivering the excellent human act. The improvement of academic quality is the main concern in the human resources development. By means of teaching, research and community diffusion, UMSU can deliver the expected generation who are capable to answer the challenge. Consequently, meeting the infrastructures and become the main point in the learning process. UMSU brings up the pride since it grows in multicultural society by the harmony and become a stake and a solution for social and society issues. This university become an ideas root of proficiency. The development of science and technology do not stop only in the classes and laboratories. The intellectuality and creativity development are also done by the direct practice. The existence of UMSU was built through the real diffusion in society. The family spirit and togetherness become the power of UMSU in managing the university. The good role model always gives a spirit to provide the best service. UMSU is a place to work out the art and talent. UMSU keeps the competitive spirit to get more achievements. The spirit for giving the best is the key in regarding to make UMSU be well known in national and international scale. In the global regulation, we know that it's impossible to overcome independently. The cooperation is the continuously effort to get more power in developing the knowledge and technology. The consciousness to give and receive is the effort to earn creation together. UMSU is ready to step together for the better future of Indonesia and the world. UMSU, excel, smart, and trusted.
Next, we will have the Vice President of aibpm, Ira Christiana, to deliver the opening remarks.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, fellow speakers, and good morning to our audience joining the 2023 Penang ICPM. First, may I thank to Dr. Daisy Kim Ming Hui, the President of aibpm Malaysia, for her hard working to make this conference happen. All the committee members and University Science Malaysia, thank you for the beautiful venue and support. Dr. Gui from PDYC, all our co-hosts from Universities of Brawijaya and Universitas Muhammadiyah Sumatera Utara, all of Indonesian fellow from Khairun University, Brawijaya University, UMSU, and many that I can mention one by one. Good morning and thank you for your support. I would like to say thank you for each our speakers for taking part on this event. The quality and caliber of speakers this year is outstanding. I also want to thank all of you for connecting this morning, and I hope you are looking forward to the discussion as much as I am. This is the 2023 is the year that aibpm starts to hold conference overseas. In this year, that we are holding our major annual event in Malaysia and next in Tokyo in a hybrid format, with audience who can attend physically in the venue and many also attend online. This year, I'm speaking to you in much more positive context in terms of global situation and economic outlook. We can look to the future with caution optimism by the progress in vaccination and recent economic and earning forecasts. As we come together today with the theme of the multiple stakeholders' contribution to recovering together and recovering stronger, I would like to mention 3 other reasons to be cheerful in Indonesian perspective. First, the banks and financial institutions have delivered good progress towards resolvability and particularly in building up loss absorbing capacity. Overall, we can say that banks and regulators have worked well together to overcome the crisis in the past years. Second, I'm glad to say that our government have delivered on resolution planning for banks, setting clear expectation and monitoring progress on resolvability. And third, we have seen that our financial stability framework has delivered during the terrible crisis. Thus, I believe we is now recovering from our pandemic situation. However, even if I open on a cheerful note, I would not like to give impression that our work here is done. Far from it. There is much to do over coming years, particularly as we get ever closer to the recovery to the healthy economic situation. Our expectations are clear. We have set the benchmark. It is now time for all stakeholders, which are government, industry, and also academic, to complete their to-do list and demonstrate that they are fully resolvable. Here, we also have a mission for the next year to provide clear guidance and set priorities, both for individual banks and the sector as a whole. In 2022, our focus will be particular on liquidity and funding in resolution, stability and reorganization plan, as well as information system and data capabilities. Our resolvability heat map will gauge and assess performance in this and others area. aibpm, now we are ready to support the education institution and government to recover from pandemic situation. And we are proud to the work done together with the education institution and authorities of our other partners. And ladies and gentlemen, let me once again thank you to the aibpm Malaysia chapter and our fantastic speakers for giving their time and insight today. And I hope all of you watching enjoy the conference. And it is now for my very great pleasure and honor to open the conference and enjoy the conference. Ira Christiana from aibpm. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the great welcoming speech, Mrs. Ira. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are very pleased to announce that the international conference is officially opened. Welcome to the 2023 Penang International Conference and Project Management.
My name is Anisatul Istifaro. I'll be the moderator for today's conference. First thing first, I will explain several matters regarding the keynote presentation session before I start to introduce the keynote speakers. The first thing that I would like to explain is that all online participants will be muted during the presentation. Second, there will be a Q&A session after the keynote speakers finish their presentations. Last but not least, the moderator has the authority to choose who will deliver the question or suggestion. Before I start, I would like to inform you that each keynote speaker has 30 minutes duration, which can either be full presentation or along with Q&A session, which will be done after the presentation session. Ladies and gentlemen, today we will have 3 keynote speakers, and our first speaker is Dr. Rubina Pradhan from Jain deemed to be University, India. Dr. Rubina Pradhan is currently an assistant professor at the Center for Research in Social Sciences and Education, Jain deemed to be University, Bangalore. She was awarded a PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, India in 2021. Her areas of interest are international organizations, humanitarian intervention, human rights, climate change, women's studies, and education. Her paper has been published in national and international peer-reviewed journals. She has also presented papers at various national and international conferences and workshops. As part of her research, she engages in the partnership theory of international organizations, mostly focusing on the United Nations and regional organizations like NATO, EU, and AU. Her area of interest also includes public policy approaches. For Dr. Rubina Pradhan, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Anisha. So hello and good morning to one and all present here today. So I'm really very glad and honored to be invited as a keynote speaker today and present my research in this very, very esteemed platform. So so let me now share my screen.
Yes, it is visible, Dr. Pradhan.
Okay, so I'll start now. So the topic for my presentation today might be a little different for all of you belonging to economics and business background. So I am taking a little bit of socioeconomic turn, mostly social, engagements. So the topic for my presentation today would be evaluating public policy approaches to women's empowerment during the COVID-19 pandemic, a perspective from the global south. So this is the structure of my paper. So first I'm going to introduce a bit about the topic, what I'm going to do and why the study is important. And then after that, I'm going to talk about some of the literature that is existing in this particular field and what is the gap and what this research intends to do. And later, I would also talk about a little bit about my research methodology, followed by discussions. So firstly, let me introduce my topic. So everyone today are aware of what pandemic has brought to the world, right? So 2019 and 2020, it was a new beginning for the policymakers across the globe because of the tremendous or very, very dreadful impact of COVID-19 pandemic. And mostly when we talk about impact of COVID-19, the effect of COVID-19 compounded on women across the world and mostly and particularly from the women from the global south, right? So the government policies to some extent everywhere have tried to focus on women's economic empowerment in the recent year post-pandemic, right? By giving subsidies, entrepreneurial finances, and etc. But what we have to see here is the post-pandemic policy approaches have really failed to examine the public aspect of policy. The policy was there, but was it meant for everyone? Was it successful? Was the implementation done properly? Which section of the marginalized, section was deprived of these policy to get this kind of policy benefits? So this is what we need to understand. So there was also, we have seen in the news, we have seen everywhere in the journals, in the articles, in newspapers, and news that there was a surge in gender-based violence during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the government has failed, to some extent to address this, right? So the reason for this is, first of all, to address the existing inequalities associated with gender in every society in the world, right? So moving on. Now, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic is not concentrated to one particular sector. It is all encompassing, right? So therefore, it is not possible for only the governments to address this problem, right? So we have to have other stakeholders who need to respond to this kind of diverse, inclusive policies. Now, in the recent years, what we have been also looking at the global arena is so much focus or attention has been given to women's empowerment, a global policy towards women's empowerment, UN, striving towards women empowerment, and also asking the different governments in the world, across the world, to work towards women's empowerment, right? So special attention has been given globally. But what has our President, United Nations Secretary General said, maintained, is that the existing gender gap and the existing, the marginalization of women can be is rolling back due to the pandemic, right? So therefore we can say the, extent of the intensity of how women are vulnerable and how pandemic have added to this vulnerability. Right. So many countries in the global south, they have used, not only in the global south, let's say all over the world, they have tried to use the virtual tools, online methods like hotlines, 24/7 hotline, accessibility to women and others to address domestic violence and other kind of social vulnerabilities. But the question that we need to ask is, were those sufficient and effective? Right. So these are the major concerns that I try to look upon. Now, coming to the literature review or existing literature review that talks about what kind of effect or the impact the COVID-19 had and what kind of measures the government have taken to address this kind of situation. Now, there are a section of scholars who talk mostly in terms of economy, right? So they have, for example, Idiola, Evans, they have spoken about, and also Dotsi, they have spoken about, women entrepreneurs, what kind of problems they have faced, right? The women entrepreneurs during the COVID and how difficult it was for them to recover from that, right? And the other section of the scholars, they have highlighted in conceptual and social perspective, saying that before understanding this economic aspect of women vulnerability and how they have been impacted, it is very important for us to look into, how women lack bargaining power in the home itself, right? The beginning is the home itself. For example, in terms of land. And this is a major reason for unequal economic distribution, which starts from home itself. So we need to understand the conceptual framework before looking at the economic and entrepreneurial aspect first, right? So Agarwal has spoken mostly about this. Now, another group of scholars like Miranda, Alfredo also talks about, government should firstly talk about or work towards such policies that would be socially just and inclusive. If you want a participatory democratic society to thrive, especially in global south, where we see frequent conflict happening, frequent conflict happening in many of the global south countries, mostly in Africa, I would say, right? Now, Francis is also of the opinion, he takes a little bit of theoretical position and talks about feminism and also criticize, feminist writers and researchers for not taking so much account into, pressing the government to formulate policies for gender equality and, women empowerment as a recovery measure. They have been talking about gender equality and therefore women empowerment. We know that what feminism talks about. But when it comes to COVID-19, what are the problems they faced? They have spoken about the existing problems, but they have not tried to, press the government to make an inclusive, policies for women empowerment. So the other group, they talk about like Bastaldi, Gorovilich, Rubio, they talk about dimension of intersectionality. And this is very, very important component that I will also be, dealing with. Because when we talk about women empowerment, the problem they face, it is not just women are not vulnerable for they being women only. There are certain other factors, intersectional factors like race, religion, ethnicity, which make them more vulnerable, you know. So this aspect is also very important. The Matt, Jean, and Bruegel has also criticized policies of the government which has failed to respond to gender inequality and argued that it is always the poorest of the poorest, you know, women and the girls in the poorest regions who suffer more. So when it comes to everything, when it comes to jobs, when it comes to health, when it comes to violence, when it comes to dignity per se, right? It is the poor women in the poorest world that they suffer most. Another group of scholars, they have been talking about the existing gap between what are the policies formulated and has the gender inequality approach or gender equality, you know, approach to address this inequality been incorporated in these policies. So these gap, to address this gap, there had been certain literature to focus on this, and have come up with, especially, you know, when they researched in Latin America and sub-Saharan Africa, they said that there was insufficient global response to address such gap aggravated due to pandemic. So this section, you know, section in Latin America and sub-Saharan Africa, there was, even in terms of global response, it was lacking. Right? So in West Asia, again, according to Jaya Singhe, Klinging, and Ali, they said that women have failed to receive any additional support from the state authorities, right? So state authorities have failed to address or answer, you know, women's grievances, their vulnerabilities, because women have different kind of requirement and they face different kind of, you know, problems. So the state have not been able to identify those and address those, or let's say include those things in their policy approaches. Now, what gap we find in this literature by, you know, reviewing this literature is that there was a very, very less emphasis given on socioeconomic aspects. It neglects policy approaches by government catering to women's empowerment, definitely in most of the global south, and the policies during and after the pandemic has, you know, has not catered to women's empowerment per se, especially when it comes to global south. Now, causes of exclusion of women in policymaking during the pandemic and its impact during the post-pandemic recovery program. Now, one of the things that I've noticed that the literature, you know, there is a gap in the literature is that nobody has spoken about, you know, women's stakeholder in policy making, about their needs and wants. Were they, you know, included even in the policy making? So these gap has been identified, you know, when I was researching about this topic. Now, let's come to research methodology. So when it comes to research methodology, I have mostly used a qualitative analysis by using a lot of secondary data, the data that has been, you know, published by IMF, the data that has been collected by UN Women, etc., to, you know, conclude or analyze my my research. So I have tried to organize all the available data, especially from the official websites and global, you know, global international organization website, to see, you know, the differences, the policies, the gender, whether it has a gender exclusive policies or gender inclusive policies, especially selecting the countries and the region in the global south, right? And therefore, I've tried, after analyzing all these and evaluating all these, I've tried to provide suggestions, a little bit of policy reform that the government could adopt to build stronger post, you know, pandemic, right? Now, having said this, let us now move on to the discussions, right? Few facts I'm going to show you, and what are the, you know, available data talks about. Now, when we look at gender disparity in public policy making, right? So one of the important goal, or let's say goal 5 of Sustainable Development Goals, caters to gender equality. But you know, bridging this gender inequality gap has remained a very, very critical issue, or has remained moot, you know, especially COVID, especially during and post-COVID-19 pandemic, right? So we have identified, and I think till today, we all believe that the role of government is very much important in bridging this gap, right? So in bringing about gender parity, how? It's through legislation, inclusive legislation, fiscal measures, public-private partnership, and other reforms. Government can actually be one of the important, medium through which we can achieve this gender parity and gender equality. For example, this is the example. This example I've taken again from IMF data, that in Singapore, what happened? It has doubled the labor force participation among women in Singapore from 28% in 1970 to 58% in 2016. That means government can help, in certain ways to bridge this gap. Though it is a small jump, when we look at the time frame, 70 to 16, but we can see that government has an important role to play. Right. So talking about gender parity, again, this data is again of 2021, 2022, right? And recently the 2023 also has come. So you can go through it and see. So gender parity, in terms of in the Middle East, Asia Pacific, and Sub-Saharan Africa only is 0.05, 0.50, 0.56, and 0.57 respectively. It is comparatively very, very low as compared to what the countries in the north, has been ranked. Okay, so here we can see where are we lacking, what we need to do. Okay, the first thing is that the government has to, step in and, formulate the policies which is gender inclusive. Now, again, one important thing that the study lacks is there was no much research conducted to analyze the policies of the government, right? So everywhere during the COVID and even post-COVID, we have seen what the government have done. But the research, there are not enough or ample research done to see how effective these policies were, right? To analyze the policies of the government. Were the gender perspective or the gender aspect there in the policies? Was it inclusive, and how effective was it, right? First is showing the gap in formulation and then implementation. Because some governments have included some amount of gender inclusivity in their policy formulation, but have faltered in implementation. So to do research to find this gap, not much research has been done. So what is the immediate requirement now is there needs to be a gender sensitive policies, right? Especially when we are talking about post-COVID world, because we have seen what kind of vulnerabilities women were in, what kinds of problem women faced, all the problems, it abruptly, emerged during the COVID period. And seeing at this, it was very much in front of us. Now we should be able to, bring up a policies which is gender sensitive. Because, millions of women and girls were left unheard, for their vulnerabilities at home as well as in public spaces. They were at the receiving end of COVID-19, pandemic, the deadly impact of COVID-19 pandemic, right? So this we can see. Now, when looking at the impact, what kind of impact, the COVID-19 pandemic on women of the Global South have faced, right? So the existing gender equalities in all spheres have intensified since the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. So this I've been telling again and again, because we know what kind of problem women are facing and how it has intensified, right? Now, when we look at the economic impacts, it doubled because of low payment, loss of job insecurity, and poverty, right? In the Global South, particularly, women have lost income, their businesses failed, their small businesses failed, there was a lot of unpaid care work, and domestic work had increased multiple times, right? So when we talk about pay gap, women were found to be not in par with the male counterpart, despite 70% of health workers are women, right? Or maybe more. This data is from till 2022, right? So when we know that most of the healthcare workers are women, but why aren't they in par with the male counterparts for doing the similar jobs? So this has increased also. Now, when we look at the social part of it, there was social exploitation at every level. Domestic abuse were reported increased and reported in many of the places in the global south, many of the countries in the global south, when they were under home quarantine. We all know that we had to stay at home, quarantine. And that time, we recorded in our country, in my country, also recorded a number of domestic abuse to increase. School dropouts increased, right? So all these who are going to take care of these people, this vulnerability, right? So these vulnerable women's voices were left unheard by the political policy makers and failed to protect women from being victimized. There might be hotlines, there might be, let's say, other online portals where they can address or let's say address the problem of domestic violence or report domestic violence. But the problem here again is, were these available to everyone, from all the castes, from all the creed, from all the religion, from all the ethnicity? Or were these available 24/7? Were the report taken in? What was the action taken? So there are a gap in policy formulation and implementation. Now, when we assess the impact of COVID-19 pandemic regionally, right? So what I have found out is that factors such as caste, race, and religion has much role to play, right? And these factors impact gender equality as well, right? So we have seen hardship in domestic work, for women and girls, early marriage of women, and selling of girls has also been found as a form of survival in the post-pandemic situation. During the pandemic, a lot of people have lost their job, right? And the poorer people, they have no other means rather than to sell off the daughter so that they do not have to feed one mouth, right? They do not, they are selling off their daughters so that the family members become smaller so that they'll be able to at least survive, right? So these kind of vulnerable situation and very, very dangerous situation has come into fore, right? So these demands appropriate policy measures. It's not only you and I who can, address this issue. So I think government plays a very, very important, in this aspect. Now, when we look into women in sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, they have reported disruption in the sexual and reproductive healthcare, right? That means because of COVID, because of quarantine, because of increasing number of, casualties and rapidly infecting virus, the women who required healthcare during their, delivery time, or let's say any other health-related issues were delayed or let's say not taken care of. They have faced this in this region in a much larger scale. So dropouts were also seen. It has increased during COVID-related measures, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, let me tell you, when I was doing this, distinguishing, comparing these countries and the impact, it was sub-Saharan Africa, which has faced, the women there have faced a lot of problem, and they were most vulnerable amongst all the global south regions or the countries, right? Now, according to UNICEF 2021, there were 69 million children who failed to attend school due to pandemic and pre-pandemic factors. Now, pandemic factors we know because of the lockdown, shutdown, etc. And pre-pandemic factor are because of poverty and other associated problems, right? So these were reported in Eastern and Southern Africa. So we can see the impact that in one hand, we are saying, or we are giving importance to education for children all over the world, and it is one of the important, one of the SDGs also. But here, just in Eastern and Southern Africa, we are seeing 69 million children who have failed to attend school, right? And COVID-19 definitely has a role to play. Now, Out of 21 countries in Eastern and Southern Africa, only 5 governments have been allocating 20% of their national budget to education. That means what about the other half, or more than 90%, right? So what kind of policies are they coming up with to ensure that everybody goes to school and everybody gets education? So this is one important thing. Now, more than 60% of women in Ethiopia and Kenya reported mental and emotional stress. Now, these are also very, very important things. So we often neglect this mental health issue. But all around the world, mental health issue has come up and COVID has doubled it, intensified this problem. So I'm not going into other countries. And just for example, I've given 2 examples, Ethiopia and Kenya, though I have a list of other, data also. Ethiopia and Kenya has had 60% of women undergoing this trauma. Now, there has been increase in emergency hotline calls due to intimate partner violence, gender-based violence, and others, which has been reported again in Kenya, Zimbabwe, South Africa, South Sudan, etc. Right? So we can see how COVID has impacted this. During the lockdown, they have to stay home, right? And they have experienced intimate partner violence and different kinds of gender-based violence, right? So this increase in the emergency hotline calls also show that the deadlier impact on women and violence, right? In Asia Pacific, again, 67% of parents. Okay, so this was a research conducted by UN Women and Women Count, which has been reported by the Diplomat in 2022. So what they have found out is that the 67% of parents in Asia Pacific have, reported and said that the domestic labor or the domestic work for their daughter has increased 67% as compared to 57% for men, right? It is always at the higher end when it comes to women. In Indonesia, 33,000 child marriages were permitted in the first 6 months of 2020, again reported by the Diplomat, research conducted by UN Women. The Philippines recorded around 280,000 cases of online sexual abuse against children also, just in the span of around 3 months, right? So these are the intensities. I have given just a few data to showcase the intensity and, how vulnerable the women, the children, and the girls were, during the pandemic. And we can imagine what government can do and which are the other stakeholders we can, coordinate with or cooperate with to bring about the policies that would, address this kind of problems. Now, COVID-19 pandemic and policy responses to women empowerment, when we talk about what kind of policy responses were there, with regard to women and empowerment. So there are certain things that the government have done. So firstly, the major problem of the pandemic was the unplanned, lockdown in most of the places. So this was enforced by the state as an emergency. That's why I was bringing time and again the important role of the state, because it is the state who does this, and it is once state has said, it should be implemented, it will be implemented. Therefore, the state's response is very, very important. So it was enforced, the lockdown was enforced by the state as an emergency, and this has created a very, very stricter rules. In some places, crackdowns on the common citizens who were on the road, they arrested people for some other reasons. Okay, so these kind of situation existed during the pandemic. So the Jordanian and Nigerian governments were 2 of the many other countries that imposed the strictest lockdown in the world. So I'm not saying that only these 2, but these were amongst all, these are the 2 also of the 2 that has imposed a strictest lockdown. So these lockdowns had a greater impact on vulnerable people like internally displaced persons and those involved in informal sectors, mostly, women IDPs and informal sector women working in informal sector. So Jordanian government, they had introduced a national health provision, right? The Jordanian government, but they did not benefit the IDPs or the women refugees. So there was an interview also taken, for women refugees there in Jordan, and they said that they did not benefit from any of the national health provision. So the question here is, what about the people who are refugees? Aren't their life valuable, right? The national health provision is fine, but the government, if somebody is in someone's, territory or jurisdiction, they have to see to it that they are taken care of, right? So women did not receive any additional support again, like state and non-state financial assistance or social protection either. Right? Even in West Asian region during the pandemic had been more repressive towards women, as has been highlighted by Ali also, right? In 2020, research conducted in 2022-21. So without government providing any kind of social protection, again, women at the receiving end of these kind of problems. Now, women in a global north as well as in global south couldn't rely on state institutions. So why I have highlighted a global north here is also women are vulnerable all across the world. It's not, my study is, concentrates on global south, but I try to, also portray that even in the global north, women suffer, right? And state institutions do very little to avoid this or to address gender-based violence. So virtual policy measures has been intensified in global south. I told you in the beginning as well, but the question of its availability, is it available 24/7? The resource involved in it, was it sufficient? And the geography should be considered, because from which territory they have come from, because people from, let's say, a very, very remotest of the places would not have an accessibility to internet connections, or they wouldn't know how to use this online portal or virtual, how to take these measures, how to use these measures, right? So this has to be taken care of. So 105 countries, again, another data by March 21st, 2020, had passed fiscal response packages worth $4.8 trillion. 106 countries introduced social protection measures to respond to COVID-19 by April 2020. A gender perspective to such intervention is must. Here I've seen a huge amount being dispersed, response packages were dispersed, but did it, consider the gender perspective to its financial response is also a question, because nowhere it is mentioned that this amount of money has been specifically for the victims of gender-based violence, victims of, let's say, intimate partner violence, or anything of that sort, right? Now, looking at the economic responses of the governments in the global south, this data I have refined and taken it from IMF policy tracker. So in Algeria, what are the responses they have given? Postponement of income tax, so that, these are some of the measures that they have adopted. In Afghanistan, they have used contingency fund to respond to pandemic emergency. That means distributing bread to the people in Kabul and elsewhere, right? 0.8% of GDP was allocated for social assistance. So this, again, 0.8 is a very less number. And also it questions, when we say social assistance, were the women included in this, right? In this 0.8% of whatever's GDP they have allocated for social assistance. Argentina have allocated 50% of its GDP, mostly again towards the health-related measures. But so these are some of the, responses that the governments in the global south have taken, and mostly these are the kind of responses which are similar in most of the countries in the global south. But again, particularly when we look into these policies, there were no separate mention of something related to women empowerment and addressing the vulnerabilities that women have faced, right? Now, gender inequality index may, most countries in South and Southeastern Asia and in Africa are ranked the lowest. And when we look into this year's gender, parity index, we will see the same. right? So in countries like Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Maldives, and others, women face more difficulties than men in accessing even the necessary products. Maybe let's say the sanitary napkins, right? So they might have shortage of it, or maybe the prices have increased, or, there was not even in hospitals, it was not available, right? So these kind of problems women have faced, and it has been reported. Now, one interesting thing that I also have highlighted is Lesotho. It's a country somewhere in southern part of Africa. It has allocated a minimum amount of Lesotho Lithi, 5.2 million, right, in support of gender-based violence. So this is the small country which has at least mentioned and highlighted that certain amount has been dedicated for the victims of, let's say, the gender-based violence, or let's say for them to the gender-based violence survivor, and also sports, or less than a little amount of sports also. So these are something different that Lesotho has done, and this is what I wanted to highlight as well. Now, women-centric policy measures adopted by the countries in the global south. So, when we talk about women empowerment measures, most of the government, remained largely exclusionary. Okay, so when we talk about, so here I'm not taking into consideration each and every countries, because it is not possible for me to go to each and every countries. Therefore, I have divided into regions. So in Sub-Saharan Africa, it contributed only 2% for supporting unpaid care for women, right? Northern Africa and Western Asia, 4%, Central and South Asia, Latin America and Caribbean to 4%, constant, right? Eastern, Southeastern Asia and Oceania, 5% contributed in support of unpaid care. Whereas when we look at North, for example, Europe, North America, Australia, New Zealand, they have contributed, 15% to support the unpaid care. So this is just to see how, how much we dedicate, or how much we support unpaid care, in what ways do we do that? Now, again, it was a research conducted by UN Women in UNFPA 2021. The research was mostly specific to East and Southern African regions. But then what they found is that there were no reliable data on gender-based violence. This is because sometimes women do not, complain about it. There was no governmental record of somebody complaining about it. So we cannot say that only, only with the data that the government give is true, because there are so many unreported gender-based violence, right? So we cannot say that this is the reliable data. Right. So therefore, identifying the drivers for GBV, that means gender-based violence, is also very important, and developing specific policies, more efficient use of technology as a reporting mechanism, training to police to prevent police brutality. Now, these are some of the important things that these research has, come up with. That means if we are talking about, if you talk about gender-based violence and address these issues, you need to develop specific policies and more efficient use of technology, because nowadays we use technology as a reporting mechanism, right? But how do you use that? There has to be training to it. Training should also be given to police to prevent police brutality, because sometimes we can see police brutality against women complaining. And training of law enforcement agencies, because there are so many law enforcement agencies which are mute, or which do not, work efficiently. So the proper training has to be given to all these, institutions, right? Now, OECD in 2021, their report says that there has to be a policy to mainstream gender. Okay, so gender inclusive measures and mainstreaming gender is one of the important things if we need to formulate or devise the policies that would address gender gap, right? So we need to mainstream gender is one of the important thing that OECD has laid out. Now, in conclusion, what I would like to say, I have just given few recommendations as to how to, devise a policy for inclusivity, right? So the first thing I have tried to say is that we need to recognize and identify the gendered nature of healthcare workforce, right? So identification of any problem while making policy is very important. Until and unless we do that, we end up making, a very, very, let's say, non-inclusive or non-effective policy. Capacity building and awareness. As I said in my discussions also, people might not be knowing what kind of, virtual tools they should be using, what kind of complaint mechanisms are there. So for these things, there needs to be a capacity building and awareness programs in the local governance level. That means not only the national level with advertisement, etc., but they have to be awareness programs at the very, very grassroots level, right? So again, another thing is gender inclusive education system. Now, education system, to understand, to bridge this gap and to formulate a policy, education plays an important role. So whenever we devise a curriculum for education in our state or a country, we need to make the curriculum gender inclusive from the very pre-primary to higher education, right? Now, selecting partners from domestic and international level for inclusive recovery. Again, this gender-based problem, or gender parity is women's empowerment. This has been the focus of the world, and not only one nation can do it. Though they have to improve their own mechanisms, but together we can do much more. Therefore, we need to partner, or we need to collaborate or cooperate with domestic as well as international organizations for a more inclusive recovery post-pandemic. So lastly, I would like to end by saying that the global recovery program would definitely fall if it excludes women's empowerment agenda or gender equality. Therefore, whenever we are talking about recovering stronger, right, we need to make it inclusive, right? And to recover faster in the post-pandemic world, it is mandatory to consider gender equality and women's right to build a better future and a better world. So with this, I end my presentation. Thank you very much. I hope I stick to the time.
Yes, it is fine, Dr. Padan. Thank you very much for the interesting talk. As a woman myself, I find it really insightful and interesting, because it relates to how women live their lives after, especially after the pandemic, and all the effects, and how women and girls and children are living these days without any new policies from the governments to take care of their problems. So this is really interesting to evaluate the policy makers to women's empowerment during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, so because we have a lot of time due to Dr. Hebatullah Adam's absence, so we will have a lot of time, but before we can do the Q&A session, I would like to invite Dr. Aiza Anwar first to deliver her presentation, and then we will do a Q&A session after her presentation. Will that be okay, Dr. Pradhan?
Yeah, sure. That's absolutely fine for me.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, we will have our second, who is also the last speaker of this conference, because Dr. Hebatullah has personal reasons in which he cannot attend this conference and will not be able to present her presentation. So our next keynote speaker is Dr. Aiza Anwar from University Science Malaysia. Dr. Aiza Anwar completed her PhD in Organization Behavior and Development at the School of Management, University Science Malaysia. She served as a lecturer at the University of Management and Technology, Lahore, Pakistan. She earned her MS from School Management, Comsats Institute of Information Technology, Pakistan. Her areas of interest are human resource management, organizational behavior, leadership, digitalization and sustainability, e-learning, workplace cyberbullying, and psychological distress. She has also served as a speaker at multiple academic and industrial sessions. She has been part of the HR Walai, Pakistan Board of Advisors since 2015. She is part of the team conducting funded projects with the Malaysian government, such as the Penang Youth Development Corporation and the Penang State Government under MMK for social development. He has published papers in several recognized journals and is a reviewer of several recognized journals. He has been a part of Pakistan and Malaysia's International Conference Organizing Committee, and she has also served as head of the International Youth Conference Reviewer Committee for 3 consecutive years. Currently, she is working on a research project funded by Erasmus in Europe. For Dr. Aiza Anwar, the time is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the great introduction. And before I start the presentation, given the fact that I do have time, we do not have another speaker, I would like to extend my congratulations to the keynote speaker, Dr. Rubina. It's a wonderful presentation. I really love your topic. Given the fact currently I am also working on gender equality, your research, I find it very insightful. That's very insightful.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aiza. Thank you.
Thank you. It was like really great pleasure to have you. And I would like to thank the conference team. Very well organized, very cooperative, makes my life a lot easier. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my ideas with you. I hope you can see my slides.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So what I have done here while going for the presentation, I would like to share with the team and also the audience about the theme of a conference, which is multiple stakeholder contribution to recovering together and recovering stronger after the COVID-19 pandemic. We did have a lot of conferences during the COVID-19 time itself, when the people were talking about would we survive it or won't we survive it. And I would believe it's a highlight of a time when we start discussing that yes, we did have survived it and we came out stronger. And I would like to start my presentation with this beautiful quote, which I like, which is, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness, it was the epoch of belief, it was a season of light, it was a season of darkness, it was a spring of hope, it was winter of despair. I would say this is how I look at the time when we all went through the COVID-19 period. It was hard for all of us as an economy, as a society, as an individual. However, we did have hope that at the end of the day, we would survive, and we did. And this survival, the process of going through to 2019 till now 2023, it was not a single individual effort, it was a multiple stakeholder contribution. And although the whole society, health, economy, environment, and everything was devastated when we went through those time, our livelihood and our society and economy, they all were severely, I would say, punished for no reason why during that time, but different countries adapted a different diverse policies and strategies to come out of it. And we did manage to survive. Every sector, and I cannot say which sector did most, but every sector, doesn't matter it's health, government, technology, technological sector, education sector, everyone played its role and everyone proactively contributed in a way to make everyone's lives easy. But in all those sectors, one thing we can see which stand out most was the innovation. We did have discussed a lot about digitalization during the COVID time, that how it has changed the way society is interacting, how it has changed the way companies are doing their businesses, how the academia is looking at it. I would like to have a bit of a bird's eye view when I would like to share that how COVID-19 has accelerated digitalization in the corporate sector and in the education sector itself. During the COVID, the policymakers and academia all looked into how the digitalization is taking over the whole society and how it has changed the policies, the organization structures, the way business are doing their operation. And they have looked into it in a really mesmerizing way, that the digitalization during the COVID-19, it actually comes as a potential silver lining, because it have changed the way we look at a lot of things. I would like, from a company perspective, from a corporate perspective, I would like to share a bit with you a very interesting McKinsey Global Survey, which is done with the executives and the senior level, just to see whether the discussions people are having, that digitalization has changed the way customer and supply chains are interacting, or it is just a discussion. Well, we have seen in our own, from our own eyes, that how it has changed everything. We did discuss before the COVID-19 that the companies, especially when they are working internationally, for the communication factor, they use video and audio conferencing. There were discussions about digital economy. We have seen the impact of how the freelancing and the project-based companies are evolving. Like this is one of the very interesting example we all can relate, that how developed countries has outsourced its work to many developing and underdeveloped countries. Upwork is one of the fascinating examples. However, when we look at all these things, there were still discussion that would the digitalization would change the company structure. Would it change the how the operations, let's say from the human resources perspective, would it change or would it not? But these discussions were really much comes to a bit of an end during the digitalization factor and acceleration during the COVID-19, because before that, everyone was thinking, okay, we might need 5 years to go for the digital economy. We might need to involve gig worker, because our HR is not maybe that equipped, because we have to involve people from payroll from all over the world. Would we be able to do that? But during the digitalization, it surprised the whole world that how companies changed itself, how company has accepted. And these are one of the few surveys which was conducted by, again, McKinsey, and it's discussed here and it's shared here that when there was discussion that maybe could we go for the remote working? Can we involve people sitting in a very underdeveloped country? Can they have the internet access to work with a company which is, let's say, based in US or UK? But during the COVID and the factor, the changes was very interesting. The people or the organization, when they think a change might take, let's say, in the first row, it suggests that 454 days. In reality, it just took 10 days. So that was the power we can see when it comes to the digitalization, and when we see at the COVID-19 role, that how it has changed the whole wild world. And I would like to share one very ground level example with my audience here, which I find quite interesting. We have discussed many things in the international level, we have discussed many things in the organization, that how it has changed, how the work from home has changed. Even now, even after the COVID-19, people still like to work from home. And given today, this conference we are having, which is virtual, and I'm here, and I don't know the audience, it's I would say joined from all over the world. It's one of the fascinating examples that how the digitalization have impacted us. Even though now we can go and attend the conferences, which is face-to-face, we still choose that let's have the conferences in a way which allows to include everyone around the globe, which is very fascinating. Now the access of knowledge is at the palm of each one of us, our hands. Here, the example I would take from a company, which is, we all know that every company, when it exists, there are external stakeholders and there are internal stakeholders. On the external stakeholder side, we have customer, local community, creditors, supplier, government, labor department. And whereas on the internal, we have owner, investors, and board of directors. One very ground level example I like to share with you was seen during the COVID time, that there was, even at the COVID time, people wanted to go and join different companies. So, but there was very long procedures. The procedures we do usually face-to-face and the physical environment, but at that time, the circumstances doesn't allow us. So what we did, the organizations, the companies, they integrated their internal and external stakeholders. Let's say, in a very simple example here, if an employee wants to go and join another organization, the first stage was changed when the interview procedure in the same city, even, it's not physical anymore, it was online. Even now today, many corporate organization, many academic institutions, what they prefer to do is they would like to have first an online interview. And if they think that, okay, we want the interview, we want the potential employee, then they go for the second physical interview. It saves the time of both stakeholders. So what the interviews after that, you know, we all have this process where we have to go for the screening of an employee, that medical clearance should be there. What they did at in the very ground level scenario, that the legal department and each company, they started to integrate and they started to share their data, that if an employee has their data with the labor department, with the medical examination in the hospital, the employee doesn't have to go through all the process, stage 1 to stage 2. They can just share their unique ID or code with the medical personnel on the potential employer, and everything can be done. It's really a simple thing, and the people who change the organization for the pursuit of better career, they would know it's quite an hassle before that. But now, and since the COVID time till now, the companies are doing it. It makes everyone life easy. It's cost effective, it's efficient. And now I would like to share another perspective with you from the education sector, that yes, we have discussed that how beautifully the companies have integrated the digitalization, but we should also acknowledge the role of academia, but the role that they are playing, how they survive. It's not just the universities who take an initiative at that time to go for an online learning. It was the schools, which is very much admirable, that everyone, every stakeholder take the responsibility that given at the time of pandemic, everyone have a right to learn. And it's not the universities and school. And we have seen the power of the unique educational side. For instance, we have seen edX, we have seen Coursera, that they have shared so many courses and very informative courses, and ask the general public to enroll themselves and learn. which was really, very fascinating to observe, because I personally enrolled myself for 1 and 2 courses just because sitting at home doing nothing, it's not that fun. It's better to learn something new. And the students have learned many technical skills. Google took an initiative at that time, and their team get on board, and they have designed many digital and many HR analytics and analytics courses. And they also provided a lot of scholarships for the underdeveloped countries and the developed countries, so that the students can come and join and they can learn the techniques. Here, this is one of my collaboration. I have done a research work with the Penang government, and it's a very fascinating initiative by the Penang government. It's named at Penang Youth Digital Talent Program, and it is completed. I have successfully published papers, and I would like you to share the results because we have done it in a very ground level perspective. So, you know, we have this academic perspective and approach when we are discussing that, okay, every organization should get involved, every policymaker should get involved. And one of the things I would really appreciate by the Penang government, that the policymaker actually understand that the importance of digitalization is so important, that the youth should be equipped with the techniques, that they started a program which is comprised of online courses related to web design, social media marketing, commerce. And idea was to help the youth be more employable, so that when they go to the market and when they present themselves, they would have all the proper techniques which an employer would want. And how that program was initiated, they first did the survey from the youth, Malaysian youth, to see their digital readiness level. And during that survey, we have around 662 participants with us to see what is the level of digital competency. We measured this in different level, like information technology, communication, problem solving technique, all digital areas, to understand that what is the digital competency level of the youth. And then these students, youth, were offered to enroll themselves in these courses. And after the end of courses, the students were again asked to take the survey. In the survey too, and the participants were around 385. And these were the same, almost same youth which were participated in the survey one, and to see that whether these courses actually help the students. So the idea of that particular survey and that particular study was to examine the digital competency level of youth before and after taking the course, and also to examine the impact of online course quality on the perceived employability of youth. Would it was helpful? That was the question. And we examined the relationship between the course quality and perceived employability. I will not go too much into the technicalities. I would just like to share with you the overview, the results. So what happened is when we did examine the digital readiness of the students, to see that how much they are equipped with the digital competency. And we designed those surveys on the basis of a digital competency framework, which is being designed by the European Union. So the idea was to see where they stand. So before the course, it was 64%. Not bad, I would say. However, then we wanted to see how much it has changed after the course. So we did a survey, and in front of you are the statistics from the information and digital literacy before and after the courses. So we examine each area of the students, how it has improved. We have looked into the information and digital data literacy, communication and collaboration, digital content creation, which improved because it was based on the technicalities that which is web design and coding. Looked into safety, online safety, how much they have understanding about the data privacy. And then after that, the problem solving ability. All these things tested the digital competency of the students. And our study does not just stop here and looked at the before and after impact. We were also wanted to understand that whether it affects the employability of the youth, how youth see it. So here I'm sharing a research in front of you that whether the students perceive employability improved after they took the course, whether they see that the course in quality is good, whether they find the courses satisfactory and effective or not. And the results were very interesting. If you want to look into a very much detail, the topic here is the paper already been published. It's recently published last month. And the results here share the idea that the program, which was very much needed, actually has a very effective role, and it improves the perceived employability. The idea of sharing this research here with you is to highlight the actual role the governments are playing. That it's not just a talk when we are saying that the importance is there, digitalization is there. It's not just a roar. It is that the policymakers are now looking into it. They are actually taking concrete steps to ensure that the youth is ready for the future. That whatever we have been through during the COVID time, it's not just the corporate sector who has taken initiatives by investing in their infrastructures, by in having more technology-oriented program, by ensuring that their employees are ready. This is now being done to the ground level, that we have learned as a society, we have grow as a society, and we have understand that if we want to go through all these changes, if we really want to make sure that the COVID times are the lessons we learned at time, we make it sure that it is actually being done something about it, they are doing it. And this is the result of one of the government initiative by the Malaysian government in the Penang state. So if we are looking into these things, we can conclude it in a very simple way that now the digital transformation, it's a necessity. It's not just an option. Doesn't matter which sector we are sitting in, doesn't matter it's governmental, doesn't matter it's educational or a corporate sector. You are in a service sector, let's say you are in the hospitality industry. Every sector understood that if the recovery process needs to be expedited, if we want to make sure that we have grow as a society, we need to understand the contribution that digitalization are making within our society. And as you can see, I have reported few statistics in front of you that which have actually highlighted the fact that businesses are looking into it, that it is a very, very important and it's a very integral part of growth that we look into it. So I would like to take my presentation up to the conclusion by highlighting the fact, the benefits of digitalization. So today I share with you the perspectives, the two perspectives, that how multiple stakeholders contributed and how they are going for the growth perspective. And we are looking into it from two perspectives. The one thing is that for the companies, it has improved and transformed business operation. It has increased efficiency, improved communication. Like right now, I am talking with the whole world, And this is one of the very simple and very beautiful examples that how the world has become, when we call it a global village, yeah, this is how it looks like, how it is cost effective, how it enhances customer experiences. Now, how the companies have invested in the infrastructure. We have seen online shopping and the impact of online shopping during and after. I would say easily before the COVID, we as a society, we were not very much into it online shopping. We like to have a feel of it. And there were people which takes time for the idea that, okay, it's better to go and do the online shopping thing. Instead of that, go walking into a shopping mall. But it has changed. Now more customers have experienced online shopping. There is investment in the virtual reality just to help the customers see how it feels, so that they don't have to walk all the way or drive all the way. It not only saving the time of the customer and the employers, it also is being very cost effective. And in academia, we have seen that before that, for students who might not have access to the international universities, now they can access their courses, they can actually join their programs, and they can get the degree without stepping outside their home. So I would like to conclude my presentation on this disputation. The last 10 years of IT have been about changing the way people work. The next 10 years of IT will be about transforming your businesses. It's very well said. And this is something we have seen. This is something we have observed now. And we can see that the change we've been through, the experiences we had, good and bad, it helped our society be a bit better. And here I would conclude my presentation, and I would say 30 minutes. I made it. Thank you so much.
Which are really important on in the way how we use those changes to our benefits. And okay, thank you very much. Now we will move on to the question and answer session. If there are any questions the audiences would like to deliver to either of the keynote speakers, please use the feature raise hand and we will unmute you. Okay, there is Mr. Prince Charles who would like to ask question. Yes, you may ask your question, Mr. Prince Charles.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. I have two questions. Maybe the first to Ms. Rubina, and the second is to Ms. Aziza. Okay, the first one is discrimination based on gender still occurs in all aspects, both in Indonesia and throughout the world. This is a fact despite considerable progress on gender equality. The nature and extent of discrimination varies widely in different countries or regions. Gender disparities in various matters, thus the economy, power, political participation, and various other matters still occur frequently. Women experience the most significant impact from the gender gap, including being vulnerable to termination of employment and loss of livelihoods, being vulnerable to becoming victim of acts of violence and bearing a double burden in the household. There is a growing issue that women do not need to work. They only need to take care of the household, husband and children, are pregnant and giving birth. Maybe you can compare between your country and some country in Southeast Asia about this. It's the first for Ms. Rubina, and the second is to I will
shall I answer
directly.
How do we do it?
And the second question,
Mr. Charles can deliver his question first, and then
yeah.
so that you can answer
Okay,
it.
the second question to Ms. Aziza. Lots of countries have digitalized the economy to advance the country. As in several developed countries that have implemented a digital system. Okay, digital transformation is being carried out in many countries, especially in economic sector. What about the countries that are still underdeveloped in technology? What about your opinion about this? Thank you so very much for your answer. I think that's all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charles, for your question. Okay, so I think we will have Dr. Rubina to answer the question first.
Okay, thank you for your question, Mr. Charles. So it was a good thought that you have captured here. So I agree with you when you said that, in most of the places, women are required to do household jobs. They are only there to do, household chores and engaged in, birth or reproductive function of a women, right? And you also asked me to see if I can compare my own country, India and other countries, and see how's the status. So that can definitely be done if the study was a comparative study. But I was trying to look into a global south and what the policy approaches were. So when I, try to compare and contrast, amongst the global south countries, what I found is that the policy approaches, definitely men, or let's say the society wants women to work in particular way or behave in particular way, right? But then, what we can see is it is the state or the government who are also imposing certain rules and restrictions, on women. So there is always a possibility that government would play a positive role, for the upliftment of the women. That is what social welfare policies are meant for, and every state needs to do that. So unless and until we falter on these grounds, we cannot grow, recover stronger post-pandemic, because we are leaving one section of the society. So that's how. So if I have to do a comparative analysis between only my country and other, maybe I can come up with more concrete answer to your question. But then my take is just that I was looking into how and why policy perspective failed, how and why the government policies faltered, what is lacking. Because in every policy that the government came up with during the pandemic and post-pandemic, what I can see is that there was, lack of inclusivity. That means women empowerment measures was not included, or maybe a very, very less spending was done to ensure women empowerment, right? So in our country, in the recent budget, they have come up with one initiative, that is gender budgeting. For women empowerment, they are trying to do it through, budgeting. So that is one method. So other countries might also inculcate these and do, Canada is one example where they do gender budgeting, and it has a tremendous impact, and they are doing very well. So that is how we can also incorporate this kind of measures where government can actually take and, make their policies inclusive. So that's what I wanted to tell you for that. Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Prince Charles?
Yes, I think I can understand. Okay, from Ms. Rubina. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is Dr. Isa. Can you answer Mr. Charles' question?
Yes, but before I answer a question, given we do have time for a good time for QA session, I would like to share with you one current study I am conducting on. It's a policy perspective of gender equality. And the idea is that we are looking into the results are still inclusive because we have not completed, but the approach and the objective is to look into the both gender role, how much each husband and wife, they are doing work at home and they are doing work in a corporate sector, and how much it is balanced. So just the notion here, which I would like to share, is that we are talking about it. People are talking about it. Policymakers understand the importance that the role of both the genders are important. So I would say it's a bright future, the way I see it. Like when we are talking about something and when we are working on something, it has a bright future. Or let's for the question for the underdeveloped one. While here, as you might remember, I am actually from Pakistan, so I have a good background. And I would say that I am coming from a developing country. And meanwhile, I am assisting in Malaysia, which is also a developing country. So the question of how the developing countries are doing, I would say not bad. This is the one thing. And the secondly is, the developed countries, they understand that the role developing countries are playing in the prosperity of economy, that they are providing the helping hand. We do have the infrastructure. We might not have an infrastructure as strong as the developed countries are, but we have the infrastructure. And we are looking into it from a different perspective. Like for instance, when we are saying that digitalization is important, if you can see, recently Google has offered scholarships only for Pakistani student, which was more than 1,000. And in the scholarship criteria was very simple, that you prove that you are interested in learning and they will give you the access. So it means if you don't have the money, if you just do have the intention and the ability, you will go for it. In the government, within Pakistani sector itself, there are different institutions funded by the government itself, where they are trying to equip the youth that they would have a digitalization skills. And these courses are really, I would say, they're not even asking the students to pay. And these courses, although it's a government initiative, it's been conducted within the universities, and universities as being part of the SDG goals, to support the SDG goals, they have given out their space, which is mostly in the weekends, where they allow the students to come and take those courses free of cost. And these universities I'm talking about are the private universities, which is very expensive for a normal civilian, but because of the government support, they are doing well. Although we do have limitations to resources, I would say. But again, the point is we are trying, we are helping. Everyone is understand the importance. So I would say.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Charles?
I think it's a yes.
Yes, thank you very much for Dr. Aziza and Dr. Rukina. I can understand what you just expect. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prince Charles and Dr. Rubina and Dr. Aiza for the question and answer session. Is there any more question for other participants or presenters? Considering that this is a really good topic and this is a good opportunity for you to maybe ask questions about their materials in relation to the theme of this conference itself. If there is any question, you can use the raise hand feature or you can type your question in the chat box and I will read it out for you.
It's a very early morning and I would really appreciate, even if they are awake, the questions would be the next level thing to expect. So I do understand that.
So one thing I would also like to highlight is that I was talking about gender, during my presentation, I was talking about women. So just to clarify, gender doesn't only mean men and women, right? So it includes all other genders, third genders as well. But here I've concentrated only on women. So that's how the conceptual understanding caters to men, women, and all genders, LGBTQIA+, and others. So that's the clarification.
Actually, Dr. Rubina, that reminds me of something that I was thinking about earlier. I was kind of thinking of a question that I would like to address to you regarding to your presentation. As you have explained before about how the government or policymakers were kind of quote unquote ignore the issues that have that women, girls, or children are experiencing during the impact of, as the form of the impact of the COVID-19. Do you maybe have a personal thought or opinion about why would they lessen their priority on making regulations to help them? Because if we think from the benefit aspect, surely it will also be beneficial for the government, right? Because it will give like quote unquote give birth to the potential or the world changing generation. But instead of making them regulations that help them, they chose to not do that. Instead, they kind of ignored and work on other matters instead. What do you think?
So in my opinion, again, thank you for the very, very brilliant thought, right? So every time I work on gender or women, same thought comes to my mind as to why aren't we taken seriously for that matter, right? So why are others in the sense, the system or the institution or the society, taking women to be of certain, characteristics, so why aren't they taken seriously is also my question. Because we are groomed in such a society. It's a construction. Gender is a construction, right? So that's how we are groomed. Biologically, we are same, right? We are humans, but it is the gender or social construction that make women vulnerable, emotional, right? Who loves pink, right? So only that category. And, it's always policy making who makes the policy. So when again I have to take a Marxist view, or let's say any other theoretical philosopher's view, they say that state is a masculine institution, right? So whatever they see in whatever policies the government make, they do make it to suit the males, or let's say a quality, or let's say a men quality, that would cater to men. So women are always, regarded to be a homemaker, right? Or regarded to take a job which suits them, like nursing, school teacher, right? So they cannot imagine women to become a scientist. So now it's changing. I won't say it is the same again, but it would again take another 30 years, 20 years to make the society incorporative or inclusive. Again, when I talk about inclusivity and changing the conception of, gendered society, changing it would again, I would say, depend on from where a particular women are. The problems the white women are facing is not similar to what Black women are facing. Again, their problems are different. Women from Africa, the problem the women from Africa is facing is not similar to someone from America is facing. There are certain similarities as well as certain differences also. But one thing common is that the gendered structure of society, which is socially constructed. And first thing, that's what I told and, made in my presentation, the point that made in my presentation is to, deconstruct the notion, the idea of gender. We need to understand gender in a very, very conceptual manner, not women being a particular category, not dividing women into a particular category and men in a particular category for that matter. Right. So only then when we, break this structure, only then I think we can expect our state to have inclusive policy making. Otherwise, they would always frame a policies. They would show and formulate a policies, but how does it implement? They need to also. So here comes again the question of equity. Right. So they have made different policies for women, let's say one-stop centers for victims of domestic, violence, or let's say the hotline calls, etc. But are those things accessible to everyone? Because people from the remotest of places, they won't be knowing, and they are not aware of these things exist even. Right? How to commute? People who are not educated, women who are not educated, do not know how to raise a complaint online for that matter. Right. And so in this way, there are a lot of gaps, there existing in our society itself. So until and unless we deconstruct this notion of gender, I think we won't be able to make a very, very inclusive policies. So it is the responsibility of you and me, of all of us to press the government, or let's say to make a position that we need this, this kind of policy should be made. So the very thing comes from, let's say, education itself, gender inclusive education, because during the very, very primary or pre-primary level, still I remember, and all of you must have remembered, that there is a different set of class. Let's say in a same class, you know, the girl student and a boy student are made to sit different. You know, there is a way where girl women walks, and the similar way. Even today I witnessed this, you know, girls in a hostel, there is a hostel, you know, in a college, and boys are supposed to go from a different direction and girls are supposed to go from different direction. Boys sit in one column or a row and girls sit in other. Why is that difference? So there comes, you know, from there, our education, very education system, which teaches us that gender, you know, we need to deconstruct it. The very same institution is practicing this. Then how can we, you know, expect changes? So I think these are the things that shapes our policy making and shapes our society as well. So that's how I think.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rubina. So I think the slight changes in the how things are socially constructed may make a bit better future for all of us. Hopefully, it won't be like take another 20 or 30 years. Maybe we can expect it within 10 years.
Sure, definitely. We shouldn't lose hope, you know. Hope is very powerful. So.
That's true. Okay, I would like to address a question for Dr. Aiza also. So you said that in response to Mr. Charles' question about how digitalization works in developing countries, and you have mentioned about you take Pakistan as the example of the developing country, right? Do you think that kind of digitalization in which like big companies such as Google itself would help contribute into the faster digitalization and help people to have like development in either corporation like business or maybe education? Do you think it applies the same to other developing countries, Dr. Aiza?
That's a really a good question. And I think this is one of the questions we academics, when we sit together and we ponder over it, because it's when we are talking about the digitalization, it's not just the skill set. When we are talking about it, we are talking about the employability of the youth. Because when we look at what the jobs are right now, like even jobs where it comes from, doesn't matter, it's a job from the psychology or it are jobs from the business domain. Everyone now needs to be equipped with the tools of digitalization. For instance, business analytics, digital leadership. These are one of the few concepts when I would say when I was graduating, and believe me, I'm not that old. When we were doing that, we do not have access to such courses. We discussed a little bit in our subjects that, okay, this is the future, but we did not know that the future is not that far. And and the beauty of all the change, and I would say the COVID, it has accelerated the pressure it has put on the government, the policymakers. It's so much huge that it's not the individual responsibility anymore. The governments are taking an active and part in it. The one example, like the paper I shared with you, it's one of the policy makers from Penang government, the PYDC, Penang Youth Development Corporation. They have initiated the project where they enrolled Malaysian youth to learn the skills. So that's one example I shared with you. The other example is the other one, which I have seen with my own eyes in Pakistan also. That what they are doing, that even if they don't have access for the infrastructure, maybe they are taking the help from the universities, and universities are providing their premises for the students to come and take the courses. This is two things, like you have to go remotely. Then the third thing is that, okay, if we do not have the physical option that you go to the university, the other thing which we are doing is the different platforms like Coursera is one of the examples where the governments, different governments of all the developing countries, they are collaborating. Like Syria, we know Syria is at war, but a Syrian government itself is doing a wonderful thing that they have equipped their nation and their youth, that they are providing them different scholarships. Students doesn't have to pay, but they can go and join different courses. Like for instance, Python. This is one of the technical skills which is being needed. And I personally know people having the background, not only from the project management, but even from the pharmacy background, that they understand these skills are important and they are enrolling in themselves. If they cannot provide something physically, what they are doing is they are providing them the opportunity to go and do it online. If they cannot have an access of internet at their home, what they can do, they have provided some universities names which are willingly giving their premises and their infrastructure that you come and take the classes. It's a very good initiative. It's a very good start. It's like trying to do your best with whatever the resources we have. And as a developing country, we do have limited resources, but I would say it's a very good start, because when they see, the students would see that how much it's going to help, when a government is saying that how much it is helping them, and the way they are trying to have a budget for all these things, I would say in next 2 to 3 years, we would see a very drastic change, that how it has changed the whole economy and the society all over the globe.
Hopefully that changes will be applied soon in our generation, especially developing countries who really need digitalization the most, because they need to catch up to like advanced countries and everything. Now I would like to address a question for both of you, because Dr. Rubina talks about how if we can use technology efficiently, it can help like the victims of the gender-based gender something violence, and then Dr. Isaac herself also talk about the digitalization. So in a way or two, these two are pretty connected in terms of how you can make development in reporting crimes or violence to the government, and how can policymakers make regulations over this thing like digitalization in to make people easier, to make the victims easier to consult maybe, or maybe complaints, or maybe share their issues, and so that government can take a step forward to lessen this kind of issues or abuse in domestic. What do you think, Dr. Rubina and Dr. Aiza? Either of you can take turns, or on which one?
Yeah, that's a very pertinent question that you've asked. So definitely what I meant by saying that there has to be a training, given to all women, because again, I'm repeating that all women are not, familiar to use technology, right? In the remotest, all people are not, all women are not educated, or they are not used to using the technology like that. So in that case, maybe there has to be some kind of a capacity building program, or there has to be some awareness among them. So even, the government or the policy makers, or maybe through PPP, or maybe through partnering with other organizations or civil society organization, they can have a kind of a capacity building in order to ensure that women can report violence. Or in the first sense, they know what violence is to them, because sometimes they accept that it's okay for men to beat a wife. Right? So that notion has to go away first. So that, thing has to be there. That awareness has to be there. And after that, once they realize that, they should be able to go and recognize which platform they should use to report a certain, crime that has been committed against the victim. Right? So in these ways, technology are very, very useful in the sense that they do not have to go to police station, they do not have to go to certain institutions which are very far off or maybe not accessible. They can sit at home, use internet, given that they are trained in doing so, and report whenever they want, right? So in this way, it can be very helpful given the proper training is to be given who handles the technology part and who, raises a complaint. So that's what I meant. Yeah, Dr. Isa can, elaborate on this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I would like to, you explained wonderfully. So I would like to share insight from another perspective. My thesis, like my expertise is bullying also, like cyberbullying. My PhD thesis is on actually cyberbullying. So from that approach, I would like to share something that, okay, there are two, whenever something happened to the victim, what I have learned to think is first the realization that a harm has been done. Like this is, it seems very simple and very basic that when we look at it, but very interesting over the time I have learned, and especially when I conducted interviews and my sample was not someone I would say illiterate, because they were all working in different service sector. That could be hotel industry, banking sector. Like I did the interviews with multiple people. It's not just on the digital platform, which is cyberbullying, which does make things look really hard to see that what's being done. It's even in the face-to-face interaction. Then sometimes the victim does not know that they are victim. I know it's strange, maybe sound looking at something, but sometimes the society, the culture, and the environment, it has so much strong influence on a person that they do not know a harm has been done to them, because if they say that they are not uncomfortable with something, usually what they've been told is this is how things has been done. If you are being ridiculed, yes, in a corporate sector, it is how you treat other people. Like the having of basic dignity and the self-respect, it's something we do not take into account. So before we actually go in and maybe start making the policies, which is really very important, I would say the start would be from the idea that educate people, educate women, not just women, men also. It's not that the bullying, harassment, or being ridiculation is only being done to women only. There are men also, and sometimes I feel pity because they cannot even say that, okay, they are the one who are the victim. So the idea is the basic training and education. Every stakeholder should be known that you are not allowed to treat anyone less than what they deserve. It's a basic human right. Respect is the right of every individual. So that's one thing. Teach people that if they are asking for self-respect, it is not something, it's a basic human right. That's the first thing. And the second thing is then you start defining the bullying, start defining, because the physical harm, it's something they can see. It's something you can go to the police and you can report. But the problem arises when it's something is in a gray area, when something is being done, but you do not have the evidence for it because there is no physical evidence for it. Especially something sometimes being done on the digitalization, sometimes in the face-to-face interaction, a comment has been made to a man or a woman that made them feel uncomfortable, not okay. Sometimes just for a sake of like basic joke, what they do is, we have a culture of WhatsApp groups right now, and they will just take one person and they will share something very, and they would say it's a joke, but you comment something very wrong about it. Take a picture of a co-worker and draw something on it. And after that, you will see in a 10 and 15 minutes, it's all around the corporate world. And it's okay. They don't even know that they are not allowed to do that. And then we have to do those policies. First, we have to know and understand that what and how a person should be treated, both a victim and the someone who is bullying, because they don't even know what they are doing is wrong. And the second is define the policies. Harassment policy, bullying policy, we have it. It's not that we don't have it, but we do not have it here, and we do not have implemented it to the soul the way it should be done. So these two things need to be done. That's my stance on this one.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rubina and Dr. Aiza. That was really, I cannot even express. I am quite speechless with all the things that both of you have find out about this matter, especially because I also think the same in terms of how I did read some articles, like news articles, in which the victims do not feel like they're the victims because they do not know that they're one. Also, maybe when hearing the both of you, I also kind of want to ask on your opinions, because like we do know ever since the pandemic hit, there are less people interaction like face to face, like directly, and most of them are just through digital communication. What do you think is like the best way for people to because COVID hits at around 2019 at the last period of 2019 to 2021, I guess, because there are 2 years of them being used to digital communication. And do you think there is a best way for maybe like the government or maybe stakeholders to contribute to even more develop the way this communication work in terms of digitally, or maybe like in terms of face to face, so they can make use more of this kind of thing to develop the society into maybe like a higher level in terms of social aspect.
Dr. Rubina, would you like to start?
Yeah, I would like to, express my opinion on that. So when you talk about digitization of education, right, so there are both pros and cons of it. That's what I felt. And I was teaching that time in some other colleges. One of the pros is you can be safe at home and also, teach, right? So give education. There's no gap between learners and the teachers. Teaching learning process will go on. But then the problem here is again ensuring if the other person, the receiver is receiving it, the effective communication that we have in person as well as, online education. So whenever I used to take a class, for example, in an online mode, so I wouldn't know if the students are listening because there would only be 5% of the student talking and answering. Others, even if I call their names, there were no response from them. So how would I know that the person is there in the class and receiving it, right? So that is another cons. And I have also, felt my personal experience that there were students who used to complain to me, or let's say, make me known that they do not have good internet connection at home, so they cannot attend the classes. And they were absent, for the entire syllabus completion. So what kind of education are we imparting? Imparting education doesn't mean imparting education to just few who have access to everything. And there were another group of students who told me that they do not have a smartphone or any, kind of a smartphone to take classes. So that is the reason they have a small phone, and some say that they only have one, they could afford only one smartphone. So that phone has been used by their sister, their brothers, everyone one by one. So they definitely have to miss classes on some days. So there are certain pros and cons to it, so that's what I felt. So one of the important things that the government could ensure is equitable accessibility of technology and, connectivity. Internet connectivity is what I feel, because the place where I belong in India also, there are some places where we do not get the connection no matter where you go. there are no connections, no internet. Now they have started to, get a Wi-Fi connection, but then we used to depend on 2G. So which is rather, it's good, better off without it, so it did not work. Even making a phone call wouldn't be possible for me. So for me, I think diversity should be there, and it should not concentrate on a very, very urban, region. For example, in India, very high-speed internet, you can find it in Bangalore, or let's say in Delhi, or let's say in Chennai. But what about other places? There are 80% of other places which are remote, or 70%. Do they have internet access? Do they even have that technology is my concern, because the people here in Bangalore, they can access from anywhere, maybe cyber cafe or anywhere. But the people from those region where they do not have connectivity, no cyber cafes, how do they do it? And in COVID, everybody was sent home. So they cannot stay in this place and access it. They had to go home, the remotest of the place, with no access to anything. So I think to bridge this gap of equitable, I wouldn't say equality, equitable distribution of resources in terms of technology and internet accessibility is a must. And government should, and policymakers should, by any means, through partnership, should ensure that this equitability or equity is, maintained. That's what I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rubina. Yeah.
Thank you very much for a very interesting intake. I would like to answer this question a little bit differently. Effective communication and the idea of digitalization. Number thing, we don't have it, and I would like to talk what if and how, what's happening when we have it. So I would like to share one recent study I conducted in the hospitality industry, and I have conducted interviews, and those interviews were the administration and middle level management. So what happened, the change we have seen in many sectors, in the hospitality sector, the change was very unique, because before the pandemic, the interaction having the customers and among employees is about, a simple one. They want to have a conference, maybe organized, a seminar might be organized there. But most of the things, they are done physically because you are there on the site. But what happened for the hospitality industry, that when they are not allowed to be there, most of their administration, they have to be at home and work from the home. So the influence was increased when it comes to the use of technology. So the question then, what happened? The thing was, what was happening there in the hospitality industry, and I would again emphasize the hospitality industry, because when we are talking about it, those are the people who are supposed to know how to communicate. That's what they do. This is a service sector. You know how to communicate. This is one of the things it's held accountable when we come to academia also. Every service sector needs to know how to communicate. And I asked them, and the idea was to ask them about the journal communication they are having, how's the work culture, how is the culture, especially the change in culture before the COVID, during the COVID, and after the COVID. And we know we do have this email, a culture of email. Like, let's take a very simple example. That one thing they highlighted, that what's happening when they are using these email culture is they are using it to bully each other. Their email has been sent to you and you have replied. Maybe you may then you are being sent an email while keeping every single person in the organization CC, and you are being received a very long email. So what's happening? You are not there, but you are being ridiculed in front of everyone. And then you have face-to-face, lack of face-to-face interaction. So you are having the meetings. And when you are having online meetings, what's happening is no one maybe know the protocols of how to conduct an online meeting. So you are facing the same level that everyone is joined in that meeting. Maybe physically there are less people, because everyone has different ways to interact. Now everyone can join with just a click. Everyone is there while they are doing their own thing. And something, if you are being ridiculed, you are being ridiculed in front of a lot of people. So we do not know. We have given a very, I would say, we have been given a sword of technology and we have no idea how to use it. We have no honor for it. So it's not just that the technology should be there. It's not just that the infrastructure should be there. It's like how you're going to use that technology, how you're going to make sure that your interaction with your fellow being is being respectful. It's the same thing. Let's say if we go for the WhatsApp. Now you can have access, like first it was the email, but now it's a WhatsApp. So even it's a Saturday or Sunday, you're having a nice breakfast with your family and then you get a message. A very interesting message from your boss and it's ruined your breakfast. What would you do? Who would tell you not to do that? You have, the ease is there, but when we are giving the opportunity to work from home, we need to understand there are certain boundaries. Work from home does not mean 24 hours you are working. It means you are available. Working from home, but there are a set of defined time that you are available. You clock in and you clock out, like the same way you do, and you go for different organizations. And these are the things which is started to disturb a lot when we are discussing the work and family life. It's disturbing it. And now it's not just like one partner is working. Both husband and wife, they are working. So they are bringing the stress of their job all time into the homes. And obviously it's affecting the kids also. The children are being affected by it. The couple is being affected by it because the boundary is so much blurred. And the problem can be resolved with one simple thing, that you just know how to communicate. You just understand the boundaries, respect the boundaries, establish the boundaries, and we are not doing that properly. And it's going to create a lot of problem if we don't address it soon. So yeah, this is what's happening.
So you would suggest that maybe policymakers or government maybe make policies or regulations in which people have to learn on how to use technology properly, so this kind of issues can be avoided or prevented.
Yes, or the organization itself have one small training class where they can tell you, please don't bother your employees when they are home. Learn to understand how to send an email.
I agree with you, Dr. Aiza.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aiza, for speaking for us. Okay, so we have Miss Melinda to ask question or maybe suggestion. Yes, Miss Melinda.
Yeah, okay. Is my voice clear enough? Yeah.
Yes, you're audible.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. The first one is I do agree about we should clock in and clock out for working from home, because especially for women, whenever the woman has a job and also has how to say that, has a role at home, usually it's gonna be like double pressure for the woman itself, because she should take care of the office and also she should take care of the home. Sometimes this is like challenge but also burden for the woman herself. While related with the informations, actually I have a questions speaking about the woman consciousness of problems, because as we know in pandemic, the pandemic gave especially for women a crisis in multidimensional poverty. It will give a lot more pressures for women to face about it. And my question is, so how to build the consciousness of problem for the woman, and then how it can be affirmed by women, and also talk about it and be resilient and be more resilient to face the multidimensional poverty for women. Thank you very much.
Would you like to address this question to Dr. Rabina or Dr. Aiza?
Miss,
I think both of the
both of them.
yeah, both of the presenters. Thank you very much.
Very well.
Very, very, again, a very, very insightful question that you've asked. So that's where we falter. We being women, we falter in every place. First of all, we don't realize that, okay? And that's what your question is, how to make them realize that you are being hurt, or maybe you're being violated, or anything, So I think one word answer to it is education, from the pre-primary level to your higher education, you should keep on talking about it. So rather, educational institutions, even these days in 21st century, we find that there is a clear demarcation between men, women, and other genders. Let's not talk about other genders. They are, I think, outcast. In many of the society, in many of the education institutions. Recently only we can see in some of the forms that we feel, that they have a section for others. Otherwise, we only had men and women, male or a female. Right. So there are these kind of societal, construction is, restricting even the government and even the women to realize what are their needs. How are they being hurt? Because I have seen in society, I think everyone have noticed that sometimes people say, I think recently, day before yesterday, 2 days before, I just read an article and then it was found research conducted by some journalist. And I think around 60 to 70% of the families say that it's okay for a man to beat their wife. Right. So this is what I'm talking about in the present generation also. So how do even wife feel that it's okay? He has beaten me up. It's okay because it's his right, because he is a husband. He is my husband. Right. So so how do you clear this out? How do you make people realize, even men, to make them realize that it's not okay, whether it's your husband, mother, daughter, friend, whoever, to harm physically. To bully it physically like that, right? So Dr. Aiza also highlighted it's a basic human dignity and rights, right? So these people, all of us needs to be educated, not only women, that they should realize that it is, you should report such violence. This is not right. But also to men, that you doing certain things to your wife or maybe to any other is not right. Right. So the basic, foundation is education. And in education, we also need to revise the curriculum time and again. We need to be vigilant on how teachers are teaching, what kind of, system, because even if we have a gender subject, or even if we have certain things related to this kind of awareness, some teachers, they do not teach it properly. So again, we need to be vigilant on this. What kind of education are they imparting? Right. So otherwise, if the education was proper, education system was developing, why do we see this kind of gender division within the class and outside even today? Because our education system are faltering. We are not able to portray, or we are not able to express, or let's say make people understand, make children, I would say. I think we would start from children understand that how our society is built, how gender as a concept is constructed. So these things are very, very vital and very, very crucial for children to understand. That's how they grow, otherwise they wouldn't grow. So if they grow in a society and an education system where you are told that you are a male, you shouldn't cry, you shouldn't be emotional, you are a woman, you should love pink, you should be emotional, we would create policies like that when we grow up. We would be thinking, we would impart the same education to our coming generation. So I think education plays a very, very important role. And education on how we are imparting education, teaching learning process, pedagogy has to be very, very, broad to deconstruct this kind of constructed notion, right? So that's my take. Dr. Aiza would be able to explain in some other way.
Thank you so much. It's very well explained. And yes, I would say that the notion is there. If we look into United Nations and we observe the international law, what we see that every law which is being devised, the idea and the grounds is there that every human being deserves equal treatment and equal respect. That's there. We have already set a tone internationally for this notion. And after that, if we look at our constitution, if we look at our law, doesn't matter the law from India, Pakistan, Malaysia, Singapore, anywhere, each law dictates that no one is allowed to disrespect another human being. And on that grounds, different other laws has been developed, constructed and being discussed. But the point is not just the laws being there. The point is not just the policies being there. It's the implementation where we are lacking. It's the denial of a people. It's actually I would say somehow the responsibility is on the both parties, the one who is doing the harm and the other one who is accepting it. Because acceptance of a harm allows men or any other person that it's okay to you for treat this way. And in this notion, I would just like to share one idea, which is a concept of a bystander. We sometimes ignore. Bystander means a witness. If in any situation, if we say that anything is happening, the two people are abusing each other, doesn't matter it's a corporate sector or it's a home, there are people around there. They are bystanders, they are witnesses who are looking at it. And we sometimes ignore that there are responsibility of a bystander itself. If you are witnessing something, say something, do something. Don't just be there and let it happen, because we think as a society itself that it's not my responsibility. And there's a very famous quotation which is said, at the end of the day, it's not the harm which being done towards, it's the silence of a friend which harm us the most. Sometimes it's not just that, okay, we are being mistreated. It's about, okay, our friends were there, our family was there. Doesn't matter it was in-laws, doesn't matter it was colleagues. You are being mistreated maybe in an email. You are being mistreated in a meeting. You are mistreated in a family gathering. Doesn't matter where you are. The interaction is not only among two people. There are witnesses there. And what they are doing. Everyone has responsibility. And they are not taking that responsibility. They are silent. And usually we have this saying in every culture, silence means agreement. This is a saying. It means when someone is being mistreated and everyone is quiet about it, it means they are okay with it. You are letting it. That's why that genocides happen internationally. The countries around them are quiet. One country go invade number of people, kill a lot of people. Other countries in the surrounding, they are quiet about it. And genocide happen. That's an international. And in the very individual level, you are being humiliated and no one is there to help you. And I would say the education should also include that. Does not tell the victim only that you are alone. Tell the bystander that you have a role to play. If you see something, a harm being done, say something, do something, maybe report it. Tell the person who has conducted the harm that this is not right. Like we cannot just create a policy and just expect that policy would go and work itself out. Each one has to take a responsibility. Each one has to be accountable. Take the responsibility for your action. If you are not a victim maybe, and you are not the one who's harming, I don't believe that no one, if you step outside, you do see people mistreating each other. Do something about it. Say something about it. So I would say just start maybe from the basic level. Each person take the accountability. The education maybe involve this side of perspective also, that everyone is a stakeholder. And if you want to improve the society, it's a responsibility of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aiza. Hopefully that answered your question. Ms. Melinda.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much for Dr. Aiza and Dr. Rubina. I think this is a really like a best answers, and it is, and I think this insight give me an idea that actually the educations or pedagogic things about it, it's not only in formal educations, but also it starts from home. Because I think the weaknesses part is on kids and also for women who are who are stay at home and doesn't have any professions outside. So I think this is also relate with Dr. Rubina and also Dr. Aiza speaking before, that actually this is really important to build technology or like a place or websites that educate the people about how to be resilient and being not okay. It should be speak, not only silent. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Melinda, for your input. Okay, that marks the end of this Q&A session as well as the keynote presentation session. Thank you very much, Dr. Rubina and Dr. Aiza, for your time to attend this conference and present an outstanding presentations to all of us here. Thank you, and hopefully their knowledge will be inspiration for all of us here, especially in terms of us, that each of us are is the stakeholder of the changes that should be made after the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's be strong together, be stronger, and let's make more changes in this world. Hopefully, world peace in the next 10 years can be achieved. Okay, now we shall return to our Master of Ceremony, Miss Rosalia Raudatul Afifah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anisatul Istighfaro. Very well, ladies and gentlemen. Those were our three keynote speakers with very insightful presentations. Right after this, we will move to the parallel or the presentation session. Before we move to the presentation session, please make sure to rename your display name accordingly to your role. All presenters can go to a certain Zoom room based on the presentation schedule. You can join the room by clicking the join button and you will be automatically joining your presentation Zoom. After the presentation is finished, all presenters can come back to the main Zoom room for the closing remark. So right now, we come to the break session. We'll meet again at 1 p.m., which it means in 2 hours ahead. So thank you.